a lot of criminal trials in this very courtroom over the decades. Hundreds, if not thousands, of jurors have sat exactly where you're sitting now, watching attorneys present their case in trials presided over by different judges. And a lot has changed since this courthouse opened. But there's one thing that's remained constant. There's one common thread that has woven its way through every case tried in this courtroom, and that's the law. The law is what guides juries like yourself to reach just and true verdicts. We don't fill the jury box with citizens, let you hear all the evidence, and then just ask, okay, folks, what do you think? We don't decide cases by opinion polls or online surveys. Juries determine what the facts of the case are. Then they apply the law as it's been fashioned and honed over time and as the judge will instruct you applies to this case. It's the oath that you've taken in this case to apply the law to the facts of this case, even if there are aspects of the law that you may not personally agree with. That is the only way we have consistency and fairness in our system of justice. This is how we settle disputes in this country. It's how we settle disputes in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts and right here in Hampshire County. In our system of law, we do not permit or condone vigilante justice. And in our system of law, two wrongs do not make a right. Now, I said to you in my opening statement last Monday that I wasn't even going to try to sugarcoat the conduct of Jonathan Letendre in the early morning hours of December 27th, 2022. And I hope you find that I haven't. He was absolutely in the wrong when he drove up to Chesterfield that night, parked his car on the street, went into that house uninvited, unannounced. He was breaking the law. He was committing a felony. He deserved to be arrested. He deserved to be charged. He deserved to be tried in this very courtroom. He deserved to be convicted. And he probably deserved a long stay in state prison. But Brian Camp short-circuited and bypassed all of that. When he pointed his Sig Sauer P365 loaded with hollow-tipped bullets, pointed it at Jonathan Letendre's head and pulled the trigger, he delivered his own verdict and he imposed his own sentence. And that was unjustified, it was unnecessary, and it constituted manslaughter. That's why Brian Camp is here today. That's why we're all here today. And that's why Jonathan Letendre is not here today. Now, we'll circle back to the law in a couple of minutes. And ultimately, the judge will give you what the law is in this case. And everything he says supersedes anything Attorney Kokonowski or I will tell you about the law today. But before you can apply the law to the facts, the jury decides what the facts in this case actually are. Now, there are some facts in this case that aren't very heavily disputed. In fact, thanks to the 911 call that Brooke Janet placed, we have a uniquely precise timeline of the events that unfolded that night. We know from the dispatcher that the 911 call is answered at 12:37 and 24 seconds. Not often you get that type of precision in a case, but we have it in this case, fortunately. And we know that 7 minutes and 43 seconds later, at 12:45 and 07 seconds, Brian Camp fires the first shot. You can actually hear it. on the 911. Now, if this case ended right here, Brian Camp wouldn't be on trial. As I said in my opening statement, that first shot that he put into the side of Jonathan Letendre was lawful. That was justified. That was self-defense. It's what happens in the next 8 minutes and 37 seconds that really matters. Now, the defendant admitted on cross-examination that after he had shot Letendre in the torso, causing Jonathan to fall to the ground, moaning and squirming, he felt as though he had neutralized the threat. I asked him, now, did you feel at that point that you had neutralized the threat? He paused, he looked at me, and he said yes. And he had neutralized the threat. The hollow-tipped bullet that he fired into Letendre's side fractured a rib, pierced his stomach, his colon, his liver, and lodged itself in the other side of his abdomen. The medical examiner testified that in addition to the bleeding, the pain would have been immense and immobilizing. And the medical examiner testified that it was highly, highly unlikely that Jonathan Letendre would have ever had the strength, the power, or the pain tolerance to regain his footing. The fact that his threat had been neutralized was also proven by what the defendant chose to do at that point. He felt that the threat had been neutralized to the degree where he left the kitchen, leaving the shotgun barrel that Mr. Letendre had apparently used against Mr. Camp right there within arm's reach. If you still think somebody's a threat, that they're capable of moving enough to come at you again, you don't leave that right next to them.
All right, prosecutor in the Commonwealth there trying to get Camp sent to state prison for shooting the intruder. Let's see where this goes. Get you a break here, and then we'll pick up the closing argument from the Commonwealth right after this.
Tonight on Court TV.
I'm Vinny Politan. Welcome to Closing Arguments. We have a big hour ahead here.
Your deplorable actions are unforgivable.
The community still doesn't know how this Boston police officer died.
He can't prove one element of his case.
It was a dramatic day, a dramatic moment inside the courtroom.
What's happening here?
It's unreal. Let me show you exactly what happened.
Closing Arguments with Vinny Politan. Tonight at 8/7 Central. Only on Court TV.
Back to Court TV Live. We're watching closing arguments in the manslaughter trial for Brian Camp. He's accused of shooting and killing his girlfriend's ex-boyfriend, Jonathan Letendre, when the victim broke into his home. Camp testified that he shot the victim in self-defense. He took the stand in this case. Let's go back to the courtroom, pick up the prosecution's closing argument.
With a loaded revolver on the countertop. You don't do that if you fear that somebody is going to get up off the ground and come at you again. He exits the house to check on Brooke, leaving Letendre in the kitchen, out of sight. He goes upstairs, he gets some clothes on, and then he's calmed down enough and gathered himself enough that he reaches for his cell phone. Jonathan's still in the kitchen, still moaning, still neutralized. Mr. Camp pulls out his cell phone. He calls his boss. They talk for 2.5 minutes. His boss then texts him some advice. Make sure you take some pictures for evidence. Mr. Camp reads that. He decides, that's a good idea. I'm going to start taking pictures. And he proceeds through the house, starting first with Mr. Letendre's body on the ground, and then taking more pictures throughout the house. Now, we know from the timeline of events that it's during this 8 minutes and 37 seconds Mr. Camp calls his boss at 12:46:46. He snaps that first picture of Jonathan Letendre at 12:52 and 58 seconds. And thanks to Mr. Camp taking that picture of Jonathan Letendre, you can see with your own eyes how much or how little of a threat Jonathan Letendre was at that moment. Just give me a second. Give me 1 second, please. This picture is taken over 7 minutes after Mr. Letendre had been shot in the torso. He's not getting any stronger. The pain isn't getting any fainter. He's on the ground, wounded, in pain, shielding his head. This picture was taken just 46 seconds before Mr. Camp shoots him in the head. "46 seconds between Exhibit 68 on the left and Exhibit 5 on the right. Now, there are a lot of things that Brian Camp could have done in those 8 minutes and 43 seconds. Those 8 minutes and 43 seconds were full of decision points for Mr. Camp. He could have stood guard over Mr. Letendre. He could have put his foot on his neck. He could have kicked him in the head. He could have gotten his girls out of the house. He could have gathered up all the weapons in the kitchen within reach of Mr. Letendre. He had so many options available to him other than using deadly force, so many alternatives to putting a second bullet into Jonathan Letendre. But those aren't the choices that he made. Now, I'd like to talk about that second shot because there were about, by my count, 25 to 30 minutes of my brother's closing argument where the first shot, which we concede was justified, was discussed. On the witness stand, the defendant claims that the second shot happened after the dispatcher asked him to go back into the house and check on Jonathan. And you will have the opportunity to listen to that 911 call. You will not hear the dispatcher ask Brian Camp to go check on Mr. Letendre. In fact, just the opposite. The dispatcher says to Brooke, "I want the two of you to stay out of the house." In any event, the defendant ends up going back inside the house. And we know from the 911 call that it's 8 minutes and 37 seconds after Mr. Letendre had been shot in the torso. The defendant then shoots him in the head, killing him instantly. And this is where the defendant's interview with the state police becomes so important. The defendant is interviewed about 5 hours after this incident. He's been to the hospital, he's been treated, he's been discharged, he's been brought back to the barracks voluntarily. Now, admittedly, he has been through a traumatic experience, but on that video, he appears calm, collected, coherent, even cracking a little joke here and there. The police ask him multiple times about how many times he shot Jonathan Letendre and whether there was any gap in between the two. He displays no confusion, no misunderstanding about what happened. He denies shooting him a second time after a passage of minutes. He is crystal clear about it.
All right, state prosecutor trying to convince this jury that they should send, that Brian Camp should go to prison for shooting Jonathan Letendre. Letendre, of course, shows up at his ex's house because he wants her back. He has a knife with him. He has a set of handcuffs with him, and he gets into the house and he fights with Brian Kemp, and guess what? He ends up dead. Michael Gottlieb is still with us. The fact that the defendant took the stand in this case, really, it's going to come down to that, right? The way he expressed what happened during this horror movie. I mean, it is right out of a horror movie. You think about it. You know, I mean, remember in Halloween when Michael Myers got back up? I mean, it's that kind of feel to it on some levels. What about that choice to have him get up there, tell his story? It could work, or the opposite could happen if there, you know, a juror or two gets a bad feeling by the way he's telling his story.
Yeah, so I think anytime we try a case, a jury wants to hear from the defendant. A jury wants to hear why you did what you did. And I think the prosecution in their summation makes a couple of mistakes here that, you know, were hopefully addressed by Camp, which is the prosecution says he could have stood ground, he could have put his foot on his neck. Both of those imply that Letendre was still a threat. So if Camp addresses in his statement to the jury the fact that Letendre was a threat to him, then the second shot was necessary. And that's all that he needed to do, is convey that the threat was still active. I was in fear for my life or the life of others, and I needed to pull the trigger a second time. So, you know, hopefully he did that, and the jury sees the horror of this horror movie that's unfolding in real life.
Yeah, let's listen to Brian Camp on the stand saying basically just that.
What happened?
As I came around the corner, I saw him getting up, and I shot him again.
Okay. When you say getting up, what did you see his position to be?
I saw his arms extended underneath of him, and the majority of his body off the ground.
Okay. And did that surprise you?
Yes, it did.
That was his sort of explanation there. Are you surprised this was prosecuted and or a deal wasn't made, like a no prison time scenario here? And maybe there was an offer that was rejected, but it just doesn't feel like a case that possibly should be where it is right now.
Yeah, so all too often we see cases where people are overcharged or charged improperly. This definitely feels like one of those cases. You know, again, the prosecutor, Mr. Gagné, said that the medical examiner testified it would be highly unlikely. He didn't say impossible or improbable that Letendre would get up. And now you've got Camp describing the fact that Letendre was getting up. He's still a threat. He's still a threat, and you have every right in your home to exercise self-defense and shoot that person until they are no longer a threat, and that's what he did. And he only used a second shot. I don't see why it was prosecuted, and I don't see how it'll be anything other than a not guilty verdict.
Yeah, I mean, the guy's a maniac, too, who comes in, a jealous maniac, who is, you know, obviously he's there for a reason because he's all in, right? He has made that decision to go all in. Let's get a break.
Yeah.
We'll
handcuffs, weapons, break-in.
Yeah. You think he was going to show mercy once he handcuffed one of the two of them?
Didn't seem like it.
Yeah, let's get a break. We'll get you back in for more of the Commonwealth's closing argument. Stay with us. Welcome back to Court TV Live. Let's head back to Massachusetts for more closing arguments in the trial for defendant Brian Camp. He's that 24-year-old man charged with manslaughter in the death of Jonathan Letendre. That's his girlfriend's ex-boyfriend. And Letendre broke into his home that he shared with his girlfriend and their two kids, and he attacked them in their sleep. He was asleep, naked, when this Letendre shows up with a knife, a pair of handcuffs, on full attack. Letendre ended up dead. Camp now facing the possibility of state prison. Let's head back into the courtroom where we're listening to the Commonwealth's closing argument.
So clear about that. Let me show you an excerpt of his interview.
Your girl was outside. Did you get the kids, or were they still in the house? No, they were still in the house. And then so you ran outside, checked on her. Do you remember what she said to her?
No, she was just talking to somebody on like the dispatch. I don't really remember what or I don't remember what I said.
And then you went back into the house.
Yeah, I got dressed.
Okay. Was there any more shots fired when you went back into the house?
No.
Did you check on the individual?
No, I left them there.
Okay. And then you get dressed?
And then went back outside, and then momentarily somebody pulled in.
Okay.
Went in the house, got some clothes, came out, police on scene. No second shot. No story about Mr. Letendre getting up off the floor. And this isn't some just little cherry-picked segment that I've picked out where the only time he's asked about it. Here's another one. All right, we are having some technical difficulties, so I'm going to forego that. But I'd urge you to go back and listen to Brian Camp's interview with the state police on at least 3 separate occasions. He's asked, did you go back in? Was there another shot inside the house? No. I went back in, I got clothes, I came back out. Now, 2 years later almost, Mr. Camp takes the stand. And he offers you a very different story about what happened that night. He says that when he was being interviewed by the state police, and I wrote this down, he said, I was having a hard time defining the 2 times I shot him. When you listen to that interview, see whether or not he's having a hard time defining 1 versus 2, 8.5 minutes apart or not. He wasn't. He was crystal clear. Having a hard time defining the 2 times I shot him. Did that sound like a polished, rehearsed line? Did it sound on the interview like he had something to hide? Like he knew he had done something he shouldn't have done? So, after not owning up to that second shot during his interview, despite multiple chances to do so by the state police, he takes the stand and he tells you a new version of what happened that night. After supposedly re-entering the house at the request of the dispatcher, which didn't happen, he claims he goes straight ahead, past the stairs, into the dining area, turns and looks, and sees Jonathan Letendre pushing himself up off of the floor. Now, given the massive injuries to Jonathan's abdomen, as testified to by the medical examiner, that is implausible. According to Mr. Camp himself, he was at most squirming on the ground. But even if Jonathan Letendre was starting to push or trying to push himself up off of the floor, what Mr. Camp claims he did next defies reality. Remember his testimony on this point? I said, how far away were you? And I kept backing up, backing up, backing up. 15 feet. He claims he was in the dining area, looking at Mr. Letendre straight ahead, 15 feet away, and then, with his non-dominant hand, his left hand, he takes his Sig Sauer, hardly even aims it, and with his left hand from 15 feet away just happens to hit Jonathan Letendre in the top of the head, bullseye, with his non-dominant hand. You could look at that testimony and just say on its face it defies reality. And I would urge you to. But there is a critical piece of evidence in this case that disproves that account. You may have heard this testimony during Trooper Uliana's testimony. He was the gentleman from Firearms Identification Section Now, what you're seeing here is a still photo from the body-worn camera footage of Trooper Arici. Remember, he comes into the house, he goes past the stairs, he takes a right, he's in the dining room area, and this is pretty much, from what I gathered, Brian Camp's vantage point of Jonathan Letendre. He's about 15 feet back. From this point, he claims with his non-dominant hand, he points the gun, barely even aiming, and hits him in the head. But the problem with that is that as Trooper Uliana testified, this is a semi-automatic weapon. You pull the trigger, the projectile goes forward, shell casing spits out to the side. And on this firearm, it spits out to the right. If he'd fired from this point, the shell casing would be in the dining room. Instead, that second shell casing ends up 15 to 20 feet straight ahead on the other side of Jonathan Letendre's body. This little piece of evidence right here didn't get a whole lot of attention during trial. That proves to you that Brian Camp's story that he fed you from the witness stand was not true, because that shell casing cannot end up there. It does not end up there in the red circle. It does not end up there if he'd shot him from 15 to 20 feet away. It does end up there if he's standing roughly where this photo is taken from and it falls out to the right. It does end up there if he shoots Jonathan Letendre from roughly the same vantage point that Trooper Brunton is in this still. Close range from above. And how do we know that that's the shell casing from the second shot? Well, thanks to Mr. Camp, the photo taken 43 seconds before he shot him in the head, the shell casing isn't there. Brian Camp may have taken an oath to tell the truth, the whole truth and nothing but the truth from that witness stand, but that doesn't mean that he did. He had to come up with a reason why he shot Jonathan Letendre in the head. He was asked for that reason by the state police. He didn't own it. And he didn't own it on the stand during trial. He didn't say, geez, the guy was coming at me again. No, 15 feet away with the magic shell casing. There are other little...
All right, let's bring back in criminal defense attorney Michael Gottlieb. He's in Fort Lauderdale. It feels like Brian Camp is being prosecuted for what he said in the interviews after the shooting. I mean, it's almost as if the prosecutor is saying, well, let's say he would have said, yeah, I went back in there and I shot him again. Then are we still here? Or is he being prosecuted for possibly lying or being confused in those moments after this living a horror movie?
Yeah, I mean, I think the prosecution's argument's a little inconsistent because they're saying it's based on the time frame and he had the ability to stay outside. Obviously, we know he went into the house. I think anytime somebody is under the strain and the stress of a situation such as this, a violent burglary where your life is threatened, your loved ones' lives are threatened, you're going to have acute traumatic stress. And your recounting of the incident is not going to be 100% accurate. I think his ability to later explain it when he's had time for reflection and thought and the ability to sort of compartmentalize what happened seems to make more sense. I also feel that for anybody that's ever fired a weapon, we know that shell casings bounce, and especially in a crime scene, can get kicked, can get moved. I don't really buy that argument, and it seems like it's a stretch to me, whether the defense addressed it or not. So it seems like if the prosecution's stretching, they have a reason, because they can't really make their point based on the direct evidence they have.
Yeah, this is a tough case. I mean, even if he had the mentality of, where maybe he did lie a little bit when he was talking, because in the back of his mind, he's like feeling like, oh, well, I don't want them to think that I went back there, because I really didn't. But if he had the attitude of like, yeah, I went back there and I hit him again because that guy's a freak, I think he doesn't show up here. He's being prosecuted on some level for the way he was able to navigate these crazy waters after this incident, in those moments and hours afterwards, which none of us want to ever go through, having some intruder coming into our house with kids in the house and him with handcuffs and a knife. We'll get a break. You see the clock, it's there. So this jury has the case. We'll get a break here, then we'll pick up the rest of the Commonwealth's closing arguments.
We want to understand the mindset behind your actions in this case. Tell me, why are you here?
She needed payback.
Payback with her life?
Really funny, really. I'm laughing. Did you see me? I laugh.
I don't want any of this. Are you not prepared today to take responsibility for any of your crimes?
Interview with a Killer. Marathon starting Thursday, 11:10 Central. Only on Court TV.
Welcome back. You see the clock on your screen, 17 minutes and counting. That's how long the jury has been deliberating, just getting started, the fate of Brian Camp in the state of Massachusetts. We're listening to the closing arguments in this manslaughter case. Camp is accused of shooting and killing his girlfriend's ex-boyfriend, who showed up at their house in the early morning hours back in 2022. The defense claims he was defending himself and his family. 2 kids were in this house when the guy showed up with a knife and some handcuffs, ended up firing 2 shots 8 minutes apart. Now he's finding himself on trial for manslaughter. I mean, he could have easily been dead at this camp. Now he's on trial. Let's go back into the courtroom for more of the Commonwealth's closing argument.
Would notice in the interview he gave to the police that differ from his testimony. When you watch his interview, pay close attention to when he's reenacting or demonstrating for the troopers how he shot Mr. Letendre the first time in the kitchen. Yeah, I just got the gun, boom, raises his right hand. For some reason, by the time he testifies, he decides, no, that doesn't sound right. I need to go with my left non-dominant hand. So all of a sudden, Jonathan Letendre is coming at him. He's got the gun in his left hand and shoots. Well, that's a problem too, because the bullet enters Jonathan's left side and goes across his body. So that cannot be how it happened. Magic bullet takes a right, flies this way, takes the left, enters Jonathan's left torso and tears through his abdomen. He also said on the stand, no, I didn't climb up on the countertop. I was able just to reach up to the cabinets, right? Remember that? Listen to his interview where he says, it's the type where I needed to climb up onto the counter to reach up there. The truth isn't hard to keep straight. This is a tough case for you guys. Nobody, none of you should like for 1 second what Jonathan Letendre did that night. And for all I know, there may still be some of you who feel like, you know what? I'm not going to shed a tear for that guy. Do something like that, bad things happen. But again, that's where the law comes in. That's why we didn't, after selecting you for this jury a week ago today, just tell you about the case and then say, okay, folks, what do you think? How do you feel? What's your own personal opinion on what should happen here? That is a haphazard roulette wheel style of justice. When the judge instructs you on the law, on self-defense, and what it means to use proper self-defense, keep listening for that word proper. By my count, you're going to hear it at least 12 times. You're going to hear the word proportional. You're going to hear the word reasonable. And the judge is going to instruct you that the Commonwealth can prove any one of 4 different ways that Mr. Camp's use of deadly force was not proper that night. Attorney Kokonowski may have misspoken when he said we have to prove it all 4 ways. Any one 4 way will suffice. Just to mention 2 of those, the judge will instruct you that if the defendant did not use or attempt to use all proper and reasonable means under the circumstances to avoid physical combat before resorting to deadly force. And you've heard in this case.
All right, prosecutor trying to urge this jury to ignore their feelings. It's not what's right, it's what the law will allow us to do. We can still get him. We can get this guy. That's the prosecutor's theme to this jury, and guess what? It works sometimes. Michael Gottlieb's watching along with us. It's always bad when a prosecutor is telling you, ignore what you think is right, but concentrate on what you're supposed to do under the law. And that's the feel right now with this close.
Yeah, so early on, he used the term vigilante justice. And that paints a picture of somebody sort of on the manhunt, looking to right a wrong. And that's not the case here. To me, that was a mistake as well. And I think he's doing a great job. He's a very polished prosecutor. But that's not what this was. This was a guy in bed with his loved one. He's sleeping naked when he's woken in the middle of the night. There's a threat to his house, a threat to his family. And I think the jury is going to feel and understand that raw emotion. And then there's a battle inside the house for 7 to 8 minutes. That's all recorded, and they get to hear that. And then Camp says that Letendre is getting up and is still a threat. And there's no refuting that he might not have been. The medical examiner said unlikely, didn't say impossible. So I don't see the jury buying and understanding the prosecutor's argument. I think it's too far-fetched.
What's your take? Guilty, not guilty, or hung?
I don't think it'll be a hung jury. I think if they come back quick, it's obviously a not guilty. I think the longer the jury deliberates in a case like this, there's a greater likelihood that they compromise. But I think once they deliberate a little bit, I think rightfully so, it should be a not guilty verdict.
Yeah, but, a lot of our viewers agree with you. Let's get a break here. Michael, thank you as always. Enjoy your Thanksgiving holiday.